right, peace and power, freedom and decolonization. As always, we greet you with our revolutionary greetings by saying that if you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is not gonna be on the streets. This revolution is not gonna be on Facebook. This revolution is in the mind, because if your mind is not free, if your mind is not under your control, your whole body will be but a tool that your oppressor will use to oppress you and oppress your people. Peace and power once again, freedom and decolonization. Today, I want us to discuss the three phases of African destruction that we have gone through. This is going to be important so that we understand the basis of certain things that we fight for. Sometimes we fight for development, we fight for modernization, we fight for, I don't know, whatever targets we have in our individual countries. So we need to evaluate the situation of Africa from the beginning of the African destruction to the present time, so that we can assess correctly and answer the question of what we need to fight for right now. Because sometimes you may just realize that development is not the true fight that Africa needs currently. Let's delve into the question quickly and see really what are the phases that Africa has gone through as as part of African destruction, as a project of European imperialism or European hegemony. Now, when we talk about the three phases of African destruction, the first thing that we want to see is the first phase, which is the physical destruction and exploitation of Africans. As it happened in the past. We can remember slavery as a project that involved European countries or European nations eventually ripping Africans out of Africa and then bringing them to Europe to be used as slaves for the production of European economy. So this is a phase that African people were actually attacked and destroyed from the physical aspect of their existence. But one important thing about this phase is that the mind of African people was not touched at that moment. It was the physical. That's the reason why people were forced to do certain things. When you are being forced to do some things because you are not willingly want to do that which you are being forced to do. And there was rebellions all over the plantations, as we know the history of slavery. People always rebel, people always protest against the slavery as a system. We can remember from the Haitian Revolution, which actually set a record for African journey to liberation and eventually emancipation. So all these things were part of resistance from the side of our ancestors to resist the system of oppression and the system of physical exploitation of them. And after this phase came another phase that we call now the phase of economic exploitation, and this was mostly manifested into what we call today colonialism. You may know that the colonial projects, before even the colonial as a system was established, European countries obviously gathered to the at the Berlin Conference in 1884, 1885 to divide Africa among themselves. And the aim of these projects was actually to exploit the resources of Africa. You see, and that's where come even the philosophy or the system of European discovery, whereby the first, the place where the first European set his foot there, even if there were other people there, he automatically becomes the one who discovered that place. So the existence of other people was meaningless. So the M actually was for economic exploitation in order to build Europe. So through this phase of economic exploitation, Africa saw its resources, no longer just the African people who were taken in the Western world to work in the plantations, but now it was African resources, natural resources, gold, diamonds, platinums, uraniums, you name it. These resources were taken now from Africa to Europe in order to build European wealth. Still, at this level, the African mind was still not touched or mostly not damaged, right? So that it was possible for African people to regroup and then fight for what we call independence. And you may remember during the time of independence, like in 1960s, there were few educated Africans on the continent. There were very few educated. One example, very striking, is in the Congo, where you had about 8 people who had attended university education. In the country of many millions people, you have like 8 people only that had gone to university or to the Western educational system. But these people that we can call today uneducated, they were able to realize that this system of economic exploitation of resources being taken out of Africa while Africans were languishing in poverty, the system was unjust and had to be destroyed. And they fought like hell in order to get what we call today the African independence. So this is what we can call the second phase of African destruction. Now, apart from this phase came now the phase at which we are today, a very important one, and we can call today's phase as the phase of mental destruction of Africa, the phase of mental or psychological destruction of Africa, which actually seals the 3 phases of African conquest. And beyond this phase, there's no other phase that is required for Africa to be totally conquered. This is the last stage, and is at this stage that Africa can make a U-turn to eventually go back to its dignity, to its glory, and eventually to its nature, to its natural place in the world. It's at this point. And this, we call this the phase of mental destruction of Africans, because it is a phase through which we see that the mind of African has been totally conquered. The mind of African has been totally conditioned to become comfortable with his conditions of servitudes and second-class citizen while he lives in his own land. So this is very important, because one remarkable thing about this phase is that we have begun to get comfortable with our conditions. We have begun to get comfortable seeing Chinese coming to Africa in our inner local communities and build their shops there, and then chase out of the business our own local people who were in the business, so that every morning when we wake up, the place where we go to get a bread is the Chinese owned business, or Arabs, or Turkish, or even Indian sometimes, and other communities, so that we don't own or control any activity of significant importance in our local communities. We have to depend on them for food, we have to depend on them for clothing, we have to depend on them for bread, for anything of significant values that we do in our communities. This is a last stage. There's no further destruction than this. And as I said, this is also a phase at which we can make a U-turn in order to give to Africa its dimension, its natural dimension of the world, the global power base. So, being at this phase of mental destruction, whereby the African young man and young woman, he's unable to see opportunities in Africa, Therefore, he is ready to take all kind of risks to cross the Mediterranean waters in order to join his paradise in Europe. We are at the phase where the mentality of African people has been destroyed, that they don't see themselves as worthy of doing something something that can change their reality, something that is worthy to be done for the conditions of Africa to change. We only think that our salvation can come maybe from the sky, from the water, or from Europe, in most cases. This is a stage where our mind has been corrupted. You see, for people who have been able to farm chickens, they will remember that when you have chicken will go away, feed themselves, and during the day, of course, and in the evening, chickens will come back to the same place where they used to be. Now, if you get a new chicken today, you're not going to release the chicken immediately, because the chicken will go and never gonna come back. It's gonna get lost. So now what you need to do a very scientific process that aims at conditioning the chicken to get comfortable in that place. So what you do, you hold the chicken, you tie a chicken, for a couple of days, and you give it some food, some crumbs. After 4 or 5 days, you release the chicken. I bet you, and I show you that chicken will go and will never go away. In the evening, it will come back at the very same place where it was held captive. And this is the condition of the destruction that Africa we are at the moment, to the point where our mind has been conditioned to be looking at the European man as the only bringer of solution to our problems. We don't look at ourselves as capable of coming up with an idea that can change our reality. We don't look at ourselves as a people who can come together and build something that would change our condition. So this is the level of destruction at which we are. So now, considering this situation, it becomes unrealistic for us to talk about development. Development seems to be not a noble goal at this moment for us as African people. Before we talk about development, we need to talk firstly about liberation from the conditions in which we are today of psychological slavery. You see, before it was physical slavery, economic slavery, now we're talking about psychological slavery, which is very important, because the one who controls your mind, the one who controls this engine here, is then the driver of your life, is actually the driver of your reality. So as a nation, as African nation, who controls our mind? What media, what system controls our mind, right? What takes the ownership of our thinking? Do we think because we as a people feel like it is worthy to think and to imagine something that we can do to improve ourselves, or we think because of some kind of impetus that has been put in us by the Western system through their media or their propaganda machines? So these are important questions that we need to ask ourselves as African people. And by realizing that our conditions today are still the conditions of mental servitudes, it becomes clear that we need to fight first for our freedom from this condition of mental servitude or slavery before we talk about development. Consider a person who is in the prison. Can he really talk firstly for his freedom, or will he talk or she talk about development? Because being in prison, when you talk about development, then are you talking about developing your prison cell, or you're talking about developing what exactly? Because in a prison, you don't have business of yourself. You don't have something that you own. You don't have control over your life. The time that you sleep is being dictated by the prison guard. The time that you eat, everything is obviously controlled and monitored by the people who have put you in the prison. It is the same situation as us today as African people. Your country that you embrace, that you want to develop, is your prison cell, because you have been put in that country not to get what you call development. You were put in that country for you to function as a slave, mentally slave, right? Who is there to legalize and justify every measure of destruction, obviously imagined by European society. So it is very important to understand that when we talk about developing our countries and stuff like that, it is an unrealistic goal that cannot take us anywhere. And if it was worthy, it would have worked for the past 60 years that we have been in these conditions. So you see, your country is a prison cell. So we need to break out of this prison, because that country was not created by an African person. It was created at the Berlin Conference as a colonial enclosure. That's how we call it, colonial enclosure, right? And you being there, and whatever that you want to develop, you are developing a project of your enemies, not your own project, and it will never gonna be beneficial to you. That is why the idea of revolutionary Pan-Africanism currently is the only idea that can help us as African people, firstly, to seek our freedom or our liberation, and secondly, to then embark in what we can call our own path towards development. So what I do for your own liberation, because the only thing that can liberate a mentally slave person is a proper education, not education that creates more alienation, which is the Western education, but the proper Afrocentric education that we are providing at the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy, as you may know already. So this is very important that we think about it. So now, if you want to embark on that journey of mental liberation, we invite you to join us in a Free-Minded Academy, so that together we can come up with a curriculum that will be useful to Africa and to our younger generation. Thank you very much for your time and your dedication to this course. We invite you to like the video and share it as part of your support to the African Continental Unity Party. This is a great agenda at this moment, a revolutionary agenda of African liberation and emancipation. My name is Kabbalah, and I am the communication member of the ACUP. So once again, I greet you with the revolutionary greetings by saying that if you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution cannot be on the streets. This revolution is in the mind. Peace and power, freedom and decolonization. Until then.